tip you should remember when mixing bass, and this is something I forget to do sometimes, and it's a mental thing for me where I put it on a checklist of always do it, but the reason I forget to do it is similar to probably a lot of you guys, which is if you're monitoring in a room that's not really well treated, like professionally done so that you hear what's really happening and you're not sitting in a null point that's severe where you don't hear 40 hertz, you don't hear 30 hertz, you don't hear any of that. Or maybe your speakers just don't reproduce it, right? If your speakers aren't big enough or don't have enough low end, you may never hear that. And if you're in a null, no matter how much they're giving you, you're still not going to hear it if you're sitting in a null point. So, what I would often forget to do is on a bass guitar, take 40 hertz below and just kind of wipe it out. And the reason I do that on a high pass filter, you basically don't want anything below 40. You may think bass instruments got to have some down there. They do, but it will get in the way of your kick or your 808 or whatever you've got providing low end. If you've got a bass instrument, you may not need 40 and below. So, a hard, fast rule is I'll give you a couple. One, serial compression is something I love to do on bass, one after another in series. In other words, you got not serial like Lucky Charms, serial like, you know, something light on the compressor, like 3-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1 ratio, or an LA2A, like something like super light. Then after it, something heavier, like 18, 20-to-1. So instead of doing just like 8-to-1 and slamming it, do that light 3-to-1, 4-to-1 thing, or even 2-to-1, and then after it, hit it with an 18 or 20-to-1. So by getting a little bit of gain reduction on the first one and then a little bit on the next one, it makes it where the one with 18 or 20 is basically a limiter at that point. But that will make things sit better than using one and hitting it harder. Also, when you consider breaking up the stuff into multiple tracks, like if you want to have take one bass DI and duplicate it or triple it or whatever you're going to do, you're going to distort one, you're going to use one for the mid-range undistorted and maybe one for the low end. Keep in mind, you're going to want a low pass above and high pass below and kind of create this situation where you've got your section of bass. Now, it will sound louder to you, which will fool you into thinking it's better if you have some of that in the middle overlapping. Like, for example, 200 hertz, 300 hertz, 400, 500, if that overlaps. In other words, you may say, wow, I should put a little more of that in both and kind of have that in both of my tracks that I've duplicated. That will hurt you more than help you. You don't want those frequencies duplicated because even though it sounds louder in solo, it's not going to sound better in the mix. It's going to make certain notes stick out. So the biggest tip when you are doing the duplicate method, where you basically create one for your round, thick, warm low end. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I've used a bass DI and then two mics on the bass amp. The bass DI I'm using for this thing where we take the low end only. Now, this is a 200 hertz low pass filter happening at 12 dB per octave. Now, I want you to see the opposite of that is happening here. See, it starts at 200 hertz and it goes the other way. So what I'm basically saying is if you do this, it will sound better to you in solo, but in the mix, it won't be as even. So that's why there's an importance there where whatever you wind up doing when you break these tracks into different things, you've got to literally be, if one's 200 and below, one's 200 and above. You don't want to do the overlap thing. All right. Now, the serial compression thing I mentioned is like this. You do the 4-to-1 and then just, with another 1176 plug-in, I got 20-to-1. So 4-to-1 and 20-to-1 in series. Now, I'm doing this on each of the tracks individually. So like this is the amp track that has mid-range only. Now, if you were to look at that on a PAZ, you would see there is some information in the 100 hertz section anyway, even though this thing is wiping out most of it. And that's mostly this, but it's lower significantly because of this 12 dB per octave slope cutoff. Also, keep in mind linear phase is on. High pass and low pass filter stuff, it's going to mess with the phase a little bit. So rocking linear phase on your EQ does help. you'll find there's a little bit of a difference in sound if you take that off. Let's play the two together, and you'll hear with linear phase on and without it. You hear how much low end you lose when you don't have it on linear phase? Listen to the difference. Zero latency, listen. It's like a whole different ball game. Natural phase. You're still losing a lot. Linear phase. You're really gonna hear the difference if you do what I just did and play your DI with your mic'd track. So in other words, it alone by itself, it's not gonna make a difference to you the way you're hearing it, but once you put it together, you'll realize that phase shift of doing this high pass, low pass filter thing gonna make a difference if you don't stick with linear phase. And then I'm hitting it with some R bass. Now, R bass just juicing up all the low end to just make it a little more powerful than it would be without. So that's with zero latency. Now linear, let's. So it makes even more of a difference on the amp track than it does on this, on the low end track, but it still makes a difference. So I would keep it in linear phase. Just keep that in mind. Not always, but when you're doing this kind of aggressive high pass, low pass filter thing, that's when you're going to notice it the most. Now, when it comes to with and without R bass, it's giving you a little more oomph in the pump. You know, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. You know, more harmonic notes happening because of this. When it comes to the mid-range track, I'm also hitting it with the little Sans amp and with this twin tube jam. That's without the Sans amp. Now, listen to it in the track and listen to how much the Sans amp helps it cut.
You, in your face, I will surround you. As long as I'm around you, with my arms I can impound you. As long as I am around you, I aim to hound you.
So let's just go to another spot. Let's go to a quieter spot.
Long as I can hold you, with my hands I will unfold you. Long as I can mold you, with my mind I will control you.
Makes a big difference. Just listen to it like on just this last note. You ready? Without it. It makes it a huge difference. You don't have to hit it super aggressively. Like, you don't really have to make it sound like a lot of distortion. Just a little bit goes a long way with this. Now, what I like to do, because a lot of times I'll have two mics on the amp, in this case, this one has a bit more distortion on it, and I just blend this in with this other one that is my primary mid-range focus. Now, I have the same stuff on it, same stuff, Pro Q3. What I basically did was just took a little more of this 2K zone out, 2500 hertz, because it was a little bitey, and that was just a characteristic of that mic. Same thing here, serial compression, pretty fast release, pretty fast attack on the 4-to-1, and then very similar thing. I'm using it as a limiter, so I'm just hitting it really hard, 20-to-1, okay? Fast as it goes, attack and release. This is the slightly more gained out version because that's what gives it that kind of that hair, and you can pepper in how much hair you want. The way I usually do it is one a little less distorted, one a little more distorted, then twin tube. Now there's no right way, wrong way. Sometimes I use different stuff just because I'm sick of using other stuff. The DI, which has all the low end, the mid range, and then this one with the bitey grit to it, they all feed into a bass bus. And this is what I mean by, even though the low end track is for low end, notice, don't forget to do that 30 hertz and below. You could even take this up a little more if you want, but the way I usually do is I'll take it up here, then I'll again do it on the bus. So all those tracks are being fed to one bus to put them together. Just don't forget to at 50 hertz and below, everything's gone because I need room for my kick to live. That's the reason I do this. And in this case, I mean, all these are on linear phase. Whenever I do an aggressive cut, I'll usually flip it to linear phase. Filters are usually the most aggressive thing to do, and that they would affect the phase the most, essentially, and that's why I do it on those. But a lot of the times I'm using SSL EQs, I'm using Neve EQs, and there's no mode to flip, to go to linear phase on there, and I don't care, you know? And so it's most of the time it doesn't matter, but it matters if you're doing aggressive filtering like that. And not always either, just sometimes. It depends if if you have something else that's relative to it that you don't want to mess with that much. That's really what it matters the most for. Now, Pro Q3 is just taken off the bottom. Then I've got the metric halo channel strip doing a little bit of EQing on the whole group together. Because if you'll notice, like, there's not a whole lot of EQ happening here. There's just filtering, and then there's the EQ built into the SansAmp, for example. So my EQing on the bass sound is of the blend, and it's on the bass bus. And then I've got my LA2A on here because I figured, why not? Let's try the 2A, and it sounded good, so I kept it. And then an 1176 after it, just like on the individual tracks, my lighter compression and then my limiter after it. Notice 2 compressors on each of those tracks that I duplicated, or no, in this case, they were 2 amps and a DI, and then on the bus itself, 2 compressors. But it's not crazy amounts of compression because by doing it in series like this, the serial compression thing, you can actually get a better sound by doing a little less on each. You don't have to hit either one as hard. Therefore, it's actually a little less compression than it would be if you were slamming any of these. I'll play you the track real quick right here just so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about.
Long as I can hold you, with my hands I will unfold you. Long as I can mold you, with my mind I will control you. As long as I'm around you, in your face I will surround you. As long as I'm around you, with my arms I can impound you. As long as I am around you, I aim to hound you. As long as I am in your face, I will surround you. As long as I am in your place, I will impound you. As long as I am around you. As long as I'm around you. As long as you're around me, we get high like zero gravity. Long as you're around me, long as you can stand me, with your legs you will unhand me. As long as I'm around you, in your face I will surround you. as I'm around you, as long as I'm around you, as long as I'm around you.
Well, I hope you guys dug that. If you did, do me a favor, throw something in the comments. Your ideas too in the comments could help. If you got other ideas for how you make the bass groove and sound good, let me know. Most important thing I find is when the bass feels so good and warm to us where it's taking up the entire car or room or whatever it is when you check it and you say, wow, the bass sounds really loud, good, and warm and that's great. But does the rest of the mix sound great? And if the rest of the mix is small or little or thin, doesn't have the opportunity to breathe, it's most likely because you forgot, like I have in the past, to get rid of 40 hertz and below. Like if you forgot to get that out of the way of the kick, there could be some woofly waffles happening down there that's ruining your mix. And as soon as you kind of do this thing where you control the low end, the mid range, you can really decide how much of the attack you want to hear and how much low end you want to hear. And you also get to hear the kick taking up the majority of the low end. There's other ways to do this too, where you could actually put the kick up around 100 or so hertz and then put the bass below it. But I find in most music, I prefer to have the kick down low. Otherwise, you wind up with a very pokey, clicky type kick. So it really depends what you're going for. But that new Zeppelin documentary, man, I gotta go see that. But I'm such a fan of Led Zeppelin, and I'm such a fan of their bass sound. And there's not a whole lot of high end on John Paul Jones's bass. It's like so like covered, like woofly. It's so covered, and a large portion of that's the amp he used, which, if I'm not mistaken, was like an acoustic bass amp. It's one of those amps that has very, very little top end in general. So no matter what you do, you're getting a lot of this low end power and not a lot of highs at all. And for them, it worked so well. And if you notice a lot of Zeppelin stuff, the guitars have very little low end. The bass has all of it. The drums have so much space taking up, and the bass takes up so much space that the guitars don't occupy a ton of low end at all, and it works. Let me know if anybody saw that documentary, by the way. I gotta go see that. Really looking forward to that. So anyway, you guys, everybody remember, all right? You got this. Evan Jaffee, Custom Cut Studios. Talk to you guys soon. You guys got this. However you do the bass. Take it easy.